All right, everybody, welcome back for an exciting, fun-filled, fun-packed week of coding. We're going to do week 7, and this week we are going to learn about storing data locally. We're going to use local storage. This week I have put my video kind of underneath the chapter reading because I want you to kind of read the chapter, go through the Cengage video. This is the code for the Cengage video, not my stuff. But follow along so you maybe have a basic understanding, and I will show you how we're going to use this local storage in our project that we're working on. Make sure you do your self-test exercises, the programming exercise, and the quiz. And I have got this function here for each of you as well. If you click on that, it should come up with this. And all you have to do is copy and paste this function, and I'll show you that in just a second. So last week we created this stuff, and this is what mine looks like. You should have an about page, graph page, password page, patient page, and a recs page. You should also have your own JavaScript, and right now the only functions in here are to navigate between pages. You should also have your own Chapter 5 CSS. I didn't give you any CSS last week, except for, putting the little thing around the graph. I kind of expected you to do that on your own. I hope that each of you did. But either way, we are going to concentrate on JavaScript mostly this week, and we're going to do the password page. We're going to allow some people to put in passwords, and then we are going to verify those using the local storage information. So what is local storage? Well, first let's go look at this thing that I gave you here. You're going to copy and paste this into your code. Let's just do that real quick. Control C. Go into your project from Chapter 5, go to your JavaScript, and you can do it right at the top. Give yourself some room. Control V to paste. Now it's a giant, long, stupid line. So I guess if you really want to look at it, we need to pull this up. Now, what is this? This is a function that will load data into local storage. What does that mean? It's memory on the computer, in your browser, that stores information. This variable right here, you can see that it is in fact a variable called patient database, right? The function loads this variable into local storage. The variable is a JSON object. JSON, JSON, you may have seen that before. It's JavaScript object notation. You should really familiarize yourself with JSON objects or JSON files, because if you get into the field, you're going to see a lot of these things. This is how data is stored, and it's a weird combination of brackets and semicolons and stuff. Yeah, so it looks a little weird, but this is, let's say we have a patient database, the big box, or a book of stuff. The first entry in that patient database is going to start at this square bracket and end at, nope, this is going to contain all of it inside the square brackets. Maybe I ought to write it out a little bit better so you can see, because I want you to understand this. Okay, so we have a patient database. In that patient database, we have objects. This object goes from here to here. And I don't like the way it's doing this. It's giving me errors because we can't do this in, or it doesn't like it in VS Code. I'm just breaking this down so that we can I can show you what it looks like. this all should be indented. All right, anyway, so we have a patient database, right? Get rid of this. And then the first, this is like the book or the database. In the database, you have several objects. The first one is this, and it goes from bracket to bracket. And you can see that it's key value pairs. So the first name is going to be equal to Anakin, comma, last name equal to Skywalker, blah, blah, blah. And that is the pattern of a JSON object. This right here is the function that loads it into local storage. You don't have to worry about any of that. I just kind of wanted you to be familiar with what it's doing, because it's going to just show up as a giant long line in your JavaScript and you won't understand it. So what does that even mean? All right, if we take let me copy this or save it. I'm saving it, and then I'm going to go to my password page. And in the body, I'm going to do an onload. So just like we did these on click and we call a function, we're going to do an onload, and we're going to call load local storage, right? That's what it's called, right? We're going to call this function right here, load local storage. And what does that do? So that's going to, when the page loads, it's also going to load local storage. And let me do this. This is my my password page, and you're going to use your developer options here. You're going to right click and you're going to go to inspect, and this works on most browsers. And over here you got lots of stuff, all kinds of stuff. This is great for if you need to identify an element, you use this button right here and it'll tell you which element you're looking at, how it's styled, where it gets its CSS, where it is on the page. Down here is your console. If there's any errors, they'll show up here, and this is great for debugging. What we're going to look at today, though, is I'm going to go to application, and if you're using a different browser or a Mac or whatever, maybe in a different place. But I'm going to go into application, and right here under storage, I see I have local storage. This is where it's getting the call from, so it's getting it from itself. It's a loopback. And then you can see right here, just like I showed you, this is the function, or this is the local storage. This is now our database, and our database has first name, gender, last name, password. It really kind of scrambles it up, but we've got height, weight, and all that good stuff in here for everything in our local storage. So that is where the local storage can be seen and viewed, and you can make sure stuff works. So if we're just looking at the first line here, we can see that there's a password in there. And this is where you have five people, 6 people in our database. Each of them have a unique password, and only those passwords will work. We have to, we don't have, see, I'm getting errors down here because add value to password is not defined. We haven't defined that function yet. So we're going to do a few things. We're going to make the password thing work. It's got to check local storage for these passwords and make sure they're valid passwords. And then if it is a valid password, it's going to let them in to the rest of the site. If it's not a valid password, it should tell them, hey, that's not a valid password. So let's see if I can get all this back to normal. And we're going to do all that in our JavaScript. Now, to make sure that this video doesn't last forever, I'm going to copy and paste a bunch of stuff, and that way you don't have to watch me type it all out. That makes the videos longer. All right, so adding a value to the password, right? That is on our password page, that's what every one of these buttons should do. Except for these. These are going to have different functions. Actually, this one needs an add value. It's got to add the 0. That's a 0. Actually, I'm going to put a backspace on there as well, I think. Maybe. Maybe. Maybe I won't. All right, so we have this add value to password, and we need to write that function so that it will type stuff into our doohickey mabobber. So I created a password called add value to function. That's what it's called, right? Add value to password. Add value to password. Okay, it's important that they match, otherwise it won't work. So we're going to take we're going to create a variable called current value, and that is going to be equal to document get element by ID of passcode, the value of the passcode. And what is that? That is this right here, passcode. And again, if you, this is going to be ugly to see. Why is it showing me the wrong web page? There we go. This right here is the input with the ID of passcode. So when we type a click in a button here, it should populate up here, and it's going to add to that value. If the button equals backspace, yeah, so we want this, I think, reset. I want to put a backspace in there. So I didn't have this in here earlier. I went ahead and quickly made a backspace button. And now it looks like this over here. I have enter on the bottom, reset, 0, backspace, and enter. That way, we can use backspace. If you type in something wrong, you can go back and have to reset the whole thing, and that's nice. So if in our function here, add value to password, the current value is going to be equal to the get element ID passcode, the value of that, which again is our input, which is this doohickey here. If it's backspace, it's going to take the current value. The current value is going to be equal to the substring from 0, the current length of the substring minus 1. So it's just going to knock the last one off the end. And then it is going to repopulate that passcode, the value, with the current value. Otherwise, it's going to update the value based on the button. So you'll remember that we put each button, obviously the one here is the one that you see on the button. When you click that button, it is going to pass this value to that function, to add value to password function. So it's passing these values back and forth to make up a string that you can shorten and lengthen and reset and all that other good stuff. If you have any questions on how this works, because I'm not really going in depth on how this works here, just let me know. But if I save this and I go in here, it should work now. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 7, and it's populating the passcodes correctly. If I hit backspace, it's taking away 0. Now all the buttons seem to work. They all seem to be adding to it, and the backspace keeps going back. So that is how we add or take away numbers from that input. Now we still have to get that value and check the pin. We also need to reset it at some point. Let's see. We'll just do a reset real quick. If we want to reset that, we just created a little reset, right? So our password, the reset button right here, doesn't have a function on it. So let's say on click equals reset. And make sure you put your little brackets in there because it is a function. If I save that and make sure that the JavaScript is also saved, all this is going to do is get that get the value of that passcode element and reset it to nothing. Super easy. So everything's saved. I go back in here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 8, 7. Oop, I hit the reset by accident, but you can see it gets rid of all of it. So now I can backspace or just get rid of all of it all at once. Super simple, and it's already pretty functional. That's pretty cool. Just a few lines of code here to get this thing up and running. But now we need to check the pin, right? So let's say you put in, if we look at Anakin Skywalker's password, you can't see. Anakin Skywalker's password right here is 123456, which is super secure. But we need to check this database. We need to check our local storage and see if it's in there, and then open the page or do something if the password is correct. So what we're going to do, we are going to create a function called check pin. So we're going to check the pin, right? I created this variable called PC. I guess that's standard for passcode. Yeah, passcode. And it's going to, again, look at this input with the document passcode and get that value. So PC is going to hold the value of whatever is in here. If it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as soon as you hit the enter button and this check password or check pin function fires off, it's going to collect whatever's in here and compare it to the local storage. Let me just make sure I've got, okay, passcode. See, I feel like I needed to check a variable. Passcode. Okay. So the load local storage function I gave you created that patient DB database. And we are going to create a variable called codes. It's going to be equal to json.parse. Now this is what lets the browser translate what is in local storage. Remember, I told you it was a JSON file, but it has to translate it, figure out what the objects are and what are the sub objects in there. So it's going to parse that data. And we are telling it to parse the data found in local storage, get item, patient DB. So again, if we, man, I hate doing this. If we go back to our inspect, we look at our application and we find this here is the patient DB database. And I don't see where it says that anywhere. It used to. They have actually recently changed this so it looks different. Oh, there it is right there. So the key is the patient database. So it is going to go in our code, is looking for that patient DB database. Now you could load several different databases into local storage at the same time, and I think we're going to do a little bit of that later. Where is my window? So it's going to find this patient database and it's going to load all of this information in. And then when we do the check pin function, it is going to go through all of them for we got a variable I right here. It's equal to nothing. This is just going to be a counter, right? Remember when we did lists, we did counting through stuff to kind of look at everything. So for everything you're going to see, the code's length is going to be just as long as the database. So we need to, if we add 15 items to the database or we only have 2 items to the database, this will work either way because we're not putting a number on it. We're just saying for the length of the database, we want that length. And then enter is false. So if the number is correct or the passcode exists, we'll turn that to true. If it's false and the passcode doesn't exist, we're going to leave it false and we'll send a message. So we're going to count through these codes. Remember, the codes is equal to the database. So for I starts at 0, as long as I is less than the length of codes, which is all the items in the database, we're going to increment I or make it 1 up. So it's going to go through 0, and then it's going to go through 1, then it's going to go through 2, and then it's going to go through 3. If it finds that the passcode, which is the information in the page, stupid thing here. If it finds that the passcode, which is it got from the input my goodness, why does it keep doing that to me? There we go. Which it grabs from this input right here. If it finds that the passcode in here is also in the database, Now this is kind of sketchy because you could put in anybody's password as long as you know it. You don't have to be the actual person with the password. So there needs to be some extra verification. Don't consider this secure. But for the lesson, if it finds the passcode in the database, it is going to turn enter true and then break out of this loop. Otherwise, enter is going to be false. If enter is true, it's going to take the user to the about page. And if it's false, it's going to say, hey, this is an incorrect PIN. So let's save this and see if it even works. We know that Anakin Skywalker's password is 1234. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if I hit enter, it takes me to the about page. Well, what happens if I put in a password that isn't there? I don't know. I'm just putting in a bunch of stuff because I'm not sure what all the passwords are. I hit enter. It's going to say, nope, that's an incorrect PIN. Ta-da! Super easy. What else do we need to do? We need to do a bunch of stuff. Actually, no, that's it for the password page. Now we have a working password page. You can reset that. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Enter. Nope, that's not a right PIN. Reset. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Reset. Oops. Okay. All this works. I don't remember what. I think one of them was several zeros, but I don't know how many. Let's try 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Enter. Yep. Okay, so as long as the password is in that database, it's going to let you through. Otherwise, it's not going to let you through. And you have a secure page. Not really. There's a lot more validation and stuff that needs to go into that. But for this lesson, this is actually pretty cool working stuff. So that is the password page, done and complete. Now, what we have to think about is this patient page. There is a lot of stuff going on this patient page. We've got names, birth dates, passwords, heights and weights, and all these buttons. And all these buttons have to do something. So, what are we going to do? We want to do a few things. We have to write 4 functions, and it's really going to end up being like 6. So the first thing we want to do is search the database, right? We'll search. We want to see if a patient is in the database. No, that's not. That's not either. Let's start with the easy ones. So on the patient page, we have this clear patient info right here. And we want that to clear the page. So this is a simple one. If it works, I've been having difficulties. So just to clear the page, right? Let's say we have, Bob Smith. You put a birthday in here, some password. He's this tall and this big, male. Now we have some stuff in here and we decide we don't want it in there. We want to clear the patient info. We want this button to clear the form. Now we have to make sure that on the patient page, our button that clears the patient info has the correct function name. So I'm calling it clear form on click, C-L-I-C-K. It's a button, should work. Anchor, I got an extra anchor in there. This one does too. All right, so save that, and I will save that. So what this is doing, again, we're just reaching out to the document, and we're getting the elements with these particular IDs. And all we're doing is saying that take the whatever value's there and erase it, make it nothing. The value is being set to nothing on each of these. So we got text, first name, last name, date, birth date, and that should be these. We got, it's the ID, not the name. So make sure we're looking at ID, text, first name, text, last name, birth date, change password, text height, text weight. And that looks correct. Save it. And we'll go over here. Okay, we got to put something in here. I love this that I can just click down on these. Now I get my height and weight. And I want to see if this works. and it is not working. Oh, you can't even see that. I don't know why this isn't working. I've been having issues with this function. So let's see what it says. If I go to inspect, uncaught reference error, clear form is not defined. So this is a good way, sorry. If you look down in your console, and something's not working, this is a good way to debug and figure out why. Every time I click this, it gives me another error, right? And so you can see the numbers counting up right here. It's because it says clear form is not defined, which means I have an error somewhere in my JavaScript. Or not. So clear form, C-L-E-A-R-F-O-R-M. I go down here, C-L-E-A-F-O-R-M. F, clear from. So I transposed that. I spelled it wrong. And if you spell it wrong, it will not work. Let's see if it works now. Probably not still. All right, clear. All right, yay. All right, so I put all that stuff in there and I clicked the button and it erased it all. So that's an easy clear form. Easy button to finish, right? So this clear button done. The next thing we need to do is a little bit of validation, right? We don't want incomplete information. So we want to make sure that the user enters all of the data fields. So we're going to check the form before we do anything else, before we check the database or anything. Because if someone just puts in a little bit of information and adds it to the database, it's then incomplete and we don't want that. So all we're going to do here is check the user form. Now this isn't button fired. We're going to actually call this in another function. But if someone goes to add data to the database, so when they click the add edit button, this should be contained within the function that adds information to the database. So this is another way, just like we did document get element by ID, this is another way to call the item or the input by the ID. If you use the $ parentheses and put that stuff in there and then select the attribute, this is value. This is just another way to call the information in that. And what we're saying is check this, check the element with this ID, check its value, and then if it's not equal to nothing, do something. And then this is and, so we're checking the first name and the last name and the birth date and the height and the weight. And if they all have data in them, if they're just not empty, and that's what the exclamation point equals means. If it's not empty right here, we're going to do something. In this case, we're just going to return true. If they're not empty, it's all good, move forward. If one of these is empty, we're going to send an alert to saying, hey, has all the required information been entered? We can't test that just yet because we need to do a few things. Man, we got to do a couple things. Before we add the patient to the database, we want to make sure that we are not adding the same person twice. So we need to go ahead and make sure that we are checking the database to see if there's an existing patient. And to do that, we will, if I can find some buttons, we're just going to go in here and we're going to create a function that's checking the existing patient. For, again, we just do this for variable I. If we're going to set I to 0. As long as I is less than the database length, we're going to increment it one time. And for every record in the database, we're going to look at something. We're doing kind of a halfway search here. We're just going to check and see if the first name is equal to the first name in the database, and then check the last name and see if it is equal to the last name in the database. We're just checking patient based on first name and last name. Obviously, if you're going to create a real CMS or something like that, you want to check on more, maybe a unique ID or something else. But we're just going to check on first name and last name here. This will work. If we find that there is a first name and a last name in the same record in the database, we're going to say, hey, it's already in the database. Do you want to update it? So that way we can change information if we want to, like the height and weight, people grow, whatever, and change the passwords. So we're going to edit the information that's different. Otherwise, we are going to not do that. We don't want to. We're going to add a patient. If they're not in there, we'll add the patient. So if this returns true, we are going to call the edit info function, which we haven't added yet. So if the patient is already there and we want to edit the record, this is a confirm right here, and I'll show you how that works in a minute. It pops up with a yes or no. If you click yes, it does something. In this case, it's going to edit the information already in the database. If they hit no, it's going to not do anything. It's just going to, okay, we don't do nothing. And yeah, it's going to return true if there's no patient in the database. It will return true, and that way we'll use that to add our patient to the database. So if we want to add the patient to the database, there's a lot of work here this week, I understand. And it is probably confusing. So it really, if you're struggling to understand, I'm just copy and pasting and speeding through this here. If you're struggling to understand, please reach out and let me know. So to add the patient to the database, the first thing we want to do is call that check existing patient function that we just wrote, right? So when we click the add button, it's going to try to add the patient. If the patient already exists, because it's going to run the check existing patient function to see if it exists. If they exist, remember this function will fire off and it'll say, hey, do you want to edit it? And we'll call another function to edit it. Otherwise, it's going to continue, and then it's going to check the user form. Maybe you should do that first. And I'm going to leave it the way it is. But we're going to check the form and make sure all of the data is entered before we add the person to the database. If it's all there, we are going to create a record here, and this may look familiar. It's kind of like a JSON record, right? It's a key value pair. The first name is going to be equal to the ID, the value of the ID, text, first name, last name, birthday, password, and all that good stuff. So we're going to create an object that has a first name, last name, date of birth, and each one of those attributes has a value. It looks just like the database, and that's why we're going to push it over there. So what we're going to do, this is called DB push, and we are going to, I keep referring to DB. Let's go back to the top. So as we load the local storage, we're probably going to need a few variables. I'm going to have global variables here, and this DB, this just makes it easier for, we don't have to parse. Remember I said that you had to, where to go? Well, anyway, it's right here. JSON parse local storage get ISO. We call this in one of our functions, but instead of calling it every single time, I just create a global variable that calls it once, and then we can reference that variable every time. So this variable DB, as we're using it later on or in these next few functions, that's all it's referencing. So that is our local database, and we're gonna push this patient object to the database. So we're adding something to the database. Then this DB is it's kind of funny to describe, but it's our local variable, and we can change this variable all we want. It doesn't change the database until you change the database, right? And that is done here. Local storage set item patient DB. So we're saying we're looking in the local storage. We are going to set something instead of get. We're going to set something in the patient database, and then we have to call this JSON stringify the DB. We're just going to stringify the DB. So then again, it kind of looks like this. This is stringified before it's parsed. I hope this makes sense. Unless you understand these terms, it can be kind of funny. And then as soon as that's done, we're going to say, okay, it's been added to the database. And run is going to equal 0 again. We will change that if we need to. It's just a, this is kind of a catch-all for later. If run is equal to 0, we're going to keep it 0. But if there's an error later, we can change that to 1 and fix it. And we'll see how all this works in a minute. So we have add, edit. No, we didn't do edit. Should we do edit? Did we do edit? No, we haven't done edit. So last thing we called this edit info right here, we want to make sure that we have the edit info. So if they're already in the database, we are going to edit instead of add, right? Because we don't want to have the same patient in there several times. We want to edit them. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to create that patient variable with the attributes of first name, last name. We're going to reach out, get those from the HTML page, just like this. We're getting the value of the item with this ID. And this gets a little confusing. So for we're creating K, it's equal to 0. This is just another counter, kind of iterate through stuff, just like the lists. But if the item, so let's say item 0 in the database, the first name is equal to the patient first name in this object. So it's looking at the database and it's looking at this object we just created and comparing the two. So if the first name and the last name of both this object that we created and the database are the same, it's going to grab the index, whether it's 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, and then it is going to change. Right here, it looks like we're just, where I'm logging the index just for error checking. You don't have to log it if you don't want to. But then we're just changing the height and the weight. So the name, first name, last name, date of birth, and password all stay the same, and gender all stay the same, because those don't typically change. But the height and weight will change. So we're just going to add and update the height and weight. And then again, we call this local storage set item database, and we are going to stringify the DB. So remember, we can change the DB variable all we want, but it doesn't change the actual database in the local storage until we stringify and push that over there and set those items. And then I'm setting run to 1. So instead of 0, run's going to be 1 here. That means it can stop. All right, check existing, add patient, search database. We don't have a search yet. So I think we may have the add done. Let's see if I can save it at this point, because we've covered a lot of things. I want you to see how it works first. Let's see if this even works. So we go to application in our we see in here. No, turn that down. Close up. All right, so we just loaded the page. I've got everything saved. We have our database here. If we want to add Bob Smith, I don't think he's in there. No, we don't have Bob Smith in there. Give him a birth date, password, height, weight. He's male, and we're going to add. Let's see what happens. Client add is not defined. What does that mean? That means I have patient add as the function name here, and on the actual patient page, it is client add. So let me do client. Oh my goodness. Client add, is that right? Client add. Client add and client add. I save that, go back. All right, Bob Smith. Birthday. Password. Height, weight. Male add. Patient has been added to the database. But has it actually? I don't see him in our database. It should populate immediately. Oh, okay. You have to hit the OK button, and then then he popped up. So we got Bob Smith, his password, his height and weight, all that. So that add function is working correctly, and so are those other ones. It's checking to see if he's already in there, or is he? Let's see. If I just changed his, if I change his height and weight, he grew an inch and gained a lot of weight. Let's say it's 300 pounds now. Not 3,000. And we go to add him. It should fire off? Hey, he's already in there, right? Do you want to edit him? Click it. It said the patient's already in the database. Would you like to update the record? We can say okay. And what happens? It gives us the index right here because we logged. This was just me. I logged that index 6. He is the 6th index. And if I check his stuff, he grew an inch, 75, and he now weighs 300 pounds. So we successfully added him and then edited it when something changed. How cool is that? I think that is pretty cool. So what if we want to pull up one of the people that is in our database, like Anakin Skywalker, and we want to search. Okay, we don't have a search function yet, so let's add a search function. We need to call a function to search for it. So again, what are we doing here? If it's I set found to 0, because I'll set it to 1 if we find the guy, and 0 if we don't. And that way I can, it's like a true false. I'm not sure you need that actually if you just do if. Anyway, to keep it simple, this is how we're doing it. Create a variable to count. Again, we're going to iterate through that database looking for the first name and the last name. So we're iterating through the database. If the element with the first name and the element with the last name that will on the HTML page, if they are equal to a first name and a last name in the database, it is going to then pull the information from the database and put it into the HTML document with that element. That's what these do right here. It's going to go into the database, pull the first name, last name, date of birth, and then throw it in the HTML page when we click the button, if they find it. If they don't find it, we're just going to say, hey, the patient's not in the database. And that is how you do that. Like that. I know a lot of you are just going to copy and paste this from the video. I really, really need you to have a solid understanding of how this works. So did I save all that? Did save all that. Scrub. Okay. All right. So we have our database here. Say I want to search for Anakin Skywalker. I put a first and last name in there, right? Because that's all we're searching on. And then I hit the search button. Search is not defined. Why is it not defined? Search database. That's why, because I have the name wrong. Again, I've done this project too many times. All right, so the search function is now defined properly. Again, Anakin Skywalker, search. And there, it changes. It pulls all the information from the database. Says, okay, this birth date, password, height, and weight. He's a male. Who else we got in here? We got Carol Danvers. Carol Danvers. If I hit search, it's going to change that stuff to her birth date, height, weight, password, all that good stuff. So that is how it works. And that's how, so you can just go in here, type in a first and last name, search up the stuff. And if their height and weight change and she grows a bunch of stuff and gets really big, we can add or edit, say, hey, it's already in the database. Would you like to update the record? You say, okay. And now Carol Danvers is really tall and overweight. I hope all of you see how this works. And this is local storage. This local storage really acts, your databases will generally be kept on the server. So local storage right here is acting as a server for us, and we're just kind of playing with it right now. But you can think of how much time you've saved storing information on the local client's computer, and then maybe at the end batching it all back to the server or something. This is how you can use local storage. There's a lot of storage in here that you may not be aware of, but this is where like your cookies are stored. You can create cookies for your websites. Obviously there isn't one here, but you can see there's all stuff in here. Your cache, shared storage, and none of this has anything, and nothing's in here because of the, this is my website or our project, but session storage, extension storage, index to databases, all that good stuff is in here. Right now, we're just using local storage. All right, what have we got next? We got our search, we got our add, we got our clear. All we need to do is be able to delete. Delete. All right, so last thing we need is a delete function. Ta-da! Like I said, I'm trying to make these client delete, patient delete. I'm trying to make these videos a little bit shorter. There's a lot of code here, a lot of stuff to understand in this week. This is a huge week, so please watch the videos at least. But I know that they're extra long, so I'm copy and pasting. So we got our function client delete, which matches the client delete function on the delete key. So this should work. We are going to try. When you hit the delete key, we want to make sure they know what they're doing. So the first thing we're going to do is call this confirm. And just like on, there was a confirm in add or edit, right? So if we want to click, we click edit. It says, would you like to update the record? There's an OK and a cancel. That is a confirm. This is calling a confirm, as opposed to an alert, which just has an OK button, and that just gets rid of the window. So we're calling this confirm up, and it's going to, hey, this is going to delete the current record from the database. Are you sure you want to proceed? If they hit yes, well, we're going to do it. So we're going to find that patient. We're going to, again, iterate through the database. You should know what these do by now. You create a variable, I, make it equal to 0, semicolon. As long as I is less than the length of whatever you're looking at, whether it be a string, an array, database, whatever, you're going to do something. And then you iterate that I. You make it grow by 1 every time. And that's how you loop through stuff. So we're going to look at this database, and if the database first name and the database last name match the items on the HTML with the text first name and text last name IDs, we're going to get that index. And we're going to hold on to that index. If the index first name and last name are the same, we are going to splice that index. We are going to set the local storage database item. We're going to stringify it. We're going to clear the form, and we're going to alert the patient that the data has been deleted. So we're cutting off that index, whatever the index is. So I is going to be the index so it's going to loop through this database. So you look at the first record, check, does the first and last name match? The second record, the first and last name match? The third record, does the first and last name match? Okay, the third record matches. That value 3, or 0, 1, 2 actually, will be stored in the variable index. And then we are going to cut that out. This is what this splice does right here. We're going to splice that index right out of there. And then we're going to clean up the database, clear the form, and alert the patient that the patient has been deleted. We do this try and catch just in case there is no match. If it goes through the whole database and says, hey, this person isn't even in the database, it's not going to do anything. So let's save this and go back to our thing here. All right, we added Bob Smith. Let's search Bob Smith back up and see how he's doing. We're going to search him up. Super easy. We are going to delete him. And here's the confirm. says this will delete the client record from the database. Are you sure you want to proceed? Yes, we do. We're going to hit OK, and the patient has been deleted. And if we hit the OK button, we can see that entry, number 6, where Bob was, is now gone. The page has been reset, and that is it. And Bob's gone. And we can do that with any one of these. Search them up, delete it. Okay, and Anakin is now gone. It took the first record off, pushed everybody up. So that's important. That's what we're doing when we stringify that database. We have to clean up that database. If we get rid of the first record, we want the second record to then become the first record. Same if we delete the third record, we want the fourth record to then become the third record, not have any gaps in there. So that is what this code does. Right, cha. And that is your project for this week. Next week, we will do the drawing and other stuff. We're going to take information from local storage and use it to dynamically generate some arrows and circles on a BMI chart. But I think this is enough for this week. There's a lot of code here for you to get to. And please, if you don't understand what you're doing, don't just copy it. Send me an email. Have me explain something more, please. I'm trying to get through these quick, but there's a lot of things that you need to understand here. So, yeah, email me if you got any questions. Thanks.